Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Dr. Anjali Demari from the Department of English, Guwahati University. We are doing paper 13, module 32, South Asia, Pakistan. Let me introduce you to the South Asian region, Pakistan. In this module, an attempt has been made to shed some light on sectarian violence and Talibanization in Pakistan, which have not only restricted the public lives of women but have posed to be threats to humanity as a whole. In this module, as I said earlier, our focus is Pakistan. Let me now take you into how Pakistan as a nation was formed. Pakistan was carved out of India in 1947. Both the nations share common history and cultural heritage. However, as far as the social and political milieu is concerned, there is a sharp contrast between the two nations. The social dominance of military, clergy, and the aristocracy has led to the frequent overthrow of elected governments in Pakistan. Since its inception in 1947, Pakistan has shared some disturbing experiences with its immediate neighbor, India. The 1947 war between the two nations has sowed the seeds of discord, which took a worse turn with the 1965 war at Rann of Kutch, the 1971 war over Bangladesh, and the Kargil episode in 1999. Pakistan is a nation with nuclear weapons, and of late it has been under the radar of security agencies worldwide post 9/11 attacks. The frequent conflicts of the country, both internal and external, have produced skewed gender dynamics in the conflict zone. Even though Article 25 of the Constitution of Pakistan ensures equality to all citizens without any discrimination based on sex, the country has a patriarchal society where men are the primary authority figures and women are subordinates. Pakistan ranks second to last in the World Economic Forum 2014 measurement of gender-based disparities in politics, economy, health, and education. Discriminatory legislation and a dysfunctional criminal justice system have put women at grave risk. Hence, in the face of any conflict, women bear the brunt of physical, financial, and emotional cost. In 1947, when Pakistan became independent, its first Prime Minister, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, stood for a democratic nation where religion was to be a personal matter that had nothing to do with the business of the state. However, over the years, it has been seen that the region has been considered to be a rogue state at times owing to its rising sectarian violence. Violence against minority religious groups, democratic leaders, activists, women, and children grab the newspaper headlines quite too often. Now, let us have a look at women in the Pakistani army. As far as the presence of women in the army itself is concerned, women have been involved in the support services of the Pakistani army right from the beginning. Begum Rana, the First Lady of Pakistan, started the Women's Voluntary Service in 1948, leading to a unit of women in the Pakistan Medical Corps. The Pakistan Army Women National Guard was also formed in the year 1949. In the 20th century, however, women were restricted from taking an active part in combat duties, although a large number were involved in the medical and engineering services. Now let us look into the sectarian violence. Sectarian violence in Pakistan refers to attacks against the people and places in Pakistan motivated by antagonism toward the target sect, usually a religious group. For more than 2 decades, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s, there was bitter hostility between the Sunnis and the Shias, and extremists groups from both sides were active in attacking each other in all parts of the country. Much of the violence committed by the Sunni militants appeared to have been inspired by the Al-Qaeda ideology and was similar to that of the attacks carried out in Iran by the same groups against the Shias. Though the government adopted a tough policy against such activities and successfully managed to control it, at least in Karachi, it came up again. Evidence points to the fact that sectarian violence manifests itself more when it has support and a base to operate from the outside. The cause of the enmity between the Sunnis and the Shias is rooted in ancient history. The Shias were supporters of Ali, son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, and the fourth caliph, temporal and spiritual ruler of the Muslim community, who was murdered in 661 AD. He was succeeded by his main rival, Muawiyah, who became caliph. It was Ali's death that led to the great schism between Sunnis and the Shias. After Caliph Muawiyah, his son Yazid took his place, but Ali's son Hussein refused to accept his legitimacy, and as a consequence, fighting ensued between the two. In AD 680, in a battle near Karbala, Hussein and his supporters were killed. It is from this point that the martyrdom of Ali and his son Hussein became a cult. The Shias believe that God will send his messenger someday to relieve them of their sufferings. It is a faith that has a following approximately 15% of the people of the world. In Pakistan, there are about 20% Shia to 70% Sunni Muslims. Thousands have been killed in the violence between these two groups. The violence, though it occurs all over the country, is concentrated in the northwest Balochistan, Punjab, and Karachi. The following are some of the incidents of attacks of the Shias that have occurred in the past. September 2011, gunmen opened fire on a bus carrying pilgrims at Mastung in Balochistan province. At least 26 Shia Muslims were killed. In January 2011, at least 10 people were killed after twin blasts targeted Shia Muslim processions in Lahore and in Karachi. In September 2010, at least 50 people were killed in a suicide bombing at a Shia rally in Quetta, southwestern Pakistan. In July 2010, 16 Shias were killed in an attack on Shias in northwestern tribal areas. In February 2010, 2 bombs in Karachi kill at least 25 Shias and injure more than 50. In December 2009, at least 30 people were killed and dozens injured in a suicide bombing on a Shia procession in Karachi. In February 2009, bomb attack on a Shia procession in Punjab left 35 people dead. Now, besides these, targets in Pakistan also include Sunni, Shia, small Ahmadi, Hindu and Christian religious groups. Now, according to scholars, several fundamental groups grew in strength when General Zia-ul-Haq tried to reinforce his military rule by Islamicizing Pakistani politics in 1979. This was also the time when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and consequently some regions of Pakistan were flushed with weapons. On the other hand, the United States and Saudi Arabia supported Pakistan with funds and money to wage a war against the Mujahideen or holy warriors in Afghanistan. A fallout of all these wars was that the youth of Pakistan were impacted directly, and many became involved in the wars, conditioned as they were by the religious education in the madrasas. The majority of the young boys of Pakistani, Saudi and Afghan origin were Sunnis, and radical units like Sipah-e-Sahaba became very, very strong. Besides the Sunnis, there were Shia men too who joined the jihad, although naturally their numbers were smaller. They, on the other hand, were supported by Iran, where the Shias were strong and in the majority. This was the genesis of radical Shia groups like the Tehreek-e-Jafriya, who are held responsible for the revenge attacks on the Sunnis. Militants often target the worshipping places and religious institutions of Shias and minority religious groups to create a sense of fear in them. In January 2002, General Pervez Musharraf banned the most radical groups and initiated a strict campaign against this kind of sectarian violence. But he was not successful, and the country seems to be saddled with the problem permanently. Another perspective is that of the Pakistani analyst Arif Rafiq, whose contention is that the basic cause of the sectarian violence is not the Sunni-Shiite conflict, but a conflict between Sunni Deobandis, a Sunni subject, and Shiite Muslims. The Sunni Deobandi militant groups are Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Tayyiba, Al-Badr, Al-Jihad, Jamaat-e-Islami, to name a few. According to him, Talibanization has been the main causal factor behind the anti-Shiite violence in Afghanistan and Pakistan. A report from Asia Report says, and I quote, "Violence against women is still endemic in Pakistan amid a climate of impunity and state inaction. Discriminatory legislation and a dysfunctional criminal justice system have put women at grave risk. Targeted by violent extremists with an overt agenda of gender repression, women's security is especially threatened in the conflict zones in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KPK province and the federally administered tribal areas." Unquote. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has made a public declaration about his intention to give the women of Pakistan a fair deal and to provide them with a violent-free environment. The government has a constitutional obligation and international commitments, including under the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or commonly known as CEDAW, to combat gender inequality and remove such barriers to women's empowerment. If he is at all sincere in his promises, he will have to look at the condition of women, particularly in FATA and KPK, where the situation for women is even worse than in other parts of the country. Thanks to the great efforts made by women activists of the country, there has been some progress made through the enactment of some progressive laws. But unless the implementing agencies cooperate, there can little change be wrought. These implementing agencies are the members of the judicial system who do not address the gender-based crimes or crimes of violence against women, and the police who are not held responsible for the violence committed against women. In the areas of FATA and KPK, the impact of the conflict and the gender-biased ideology of the tribals has severely affected the lives of women. The extent to which rights violations go unpunished is particularly alarming in FATA and KPK, where women are subjected to state-sanctioned discrimination, militant violence, religious extremism, and sexual violence. Militants target women's rights activists, political leaders, and development workers without consequences. The prevalence of informal justice and mechanisms in many parts of Pakistan, particularly in Pakhtunkhwa and FATA, are highly discriminatory toward women, and the government's indiscriminate military operations, which have displaced millions, have further aggravated the challenges they face in the conflict zones. Now let us look at women in FATA, that is federally administered tribal areas. Though gender discrimination is widely prevalent in Pakistan, the women in FATA are far worse off because even the most fundamental rights are denied to them. Actually, FATA has been neglected by the government for many years and lags behind in terms of education and development substantially. Rather than the Code of Criminal Procedure, the area is governed by the Jirga system, which deprives women the chance to seek any kind of judicial reprieve. Traditionally, weaker members of society, like women and children, suffer most under the system, and they also have borne the brunt of military and security operations. The resulting problems, such as internal displacement, make women especially vulnerable, as they are more susceptible to exploitation and sexual abuse in camps than men. The women in the area are generally uneducated and dependent on their men. when the men are killed or when they refuse to take responsibility for them or their children, their situations become very pitiable. Since the livelihood opportunities are few, the women are sexually exploited. The UNDP is providing help in the form of starting vocational training programs for women in the region so that they can become at least somewhat self-reliant. A revolutionary development was the decision of Badam Zari to stand for election to the National Assembly in 2013. 45 years old, she was the first woman to contest the election from FATA. Of 670 candidates, there were 161 women participating in the election. Her husband, Noor Muhammad, is a principal at a local school. FATA is one of the poorest and least developed regions of Pakistan. More than 50% of the households fall below the poverty line. On life in FATA, Zari said, and I quote, "I deeply regret not being educated. Therefore, my mission is to get our future generation, especially girls, educated. Everything is easy if you want to take it easy. If you make things difficult for yourself, everything becomes difficult." But in my opinion, the biggest problem in FATA is lack of education. This should be resolved for both boys and girls. She believes education is the answer to every problem, especially for women. If women are educated, all our problems would be resolved. It is said that the first seminary for a child is the lap of her or his mother. So if mothers are educated and aware, they would be able to guide their children in the right direction, she said. The UNDP provided help by training of polling staff and security personnel and voter education targeting inclusion of youth and women. Zari lost the election, but the fact that she could think of contesting was in itself a big step. Now let us discuss women in KPK or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. In spite of the ratification of CEDAW by Pakistan, women who have been hit in KPK by militancy and military operations that have disrupted the peace, fragmented communities and destroyed homes and livelihoods are a neglected lot. There is a general atmosphere of discouragement for girls attending schools, and sometimes those who do not obey are even publicly flogged. It was here in Mingora that on 9th October in the year 2012, Malala Yousafzai and her two friends were attacked for attending school. Thus, standing up for one's rights literally means putting oneself at risk of death. Attacks on women are frequent occurrence, as is sexual exploitation, especially of those who are left alone because of the death of their husbands or if their men have gone to search for work. However, talking about the exploitation is taboo, and in any case, the women are too afraid to talk. The healthcare system is almost non-existent. Women are trafficked and forced into prostitution. The government needs to provide relief and rehabilitation assistance to conflict-affected women and involve them in their efforts at peacekeeping. A gender perspective therefore becomes essential, especially because it has been missing so far. Now we'll go into a discussion of the Taliban. Talibanization refers to the political and social process following or imitating the political system, religious laws and lifestyle of Taliban, which might include strict restrictions upon women and bans on Western ideas. Women's security and their social, political and economic status in Pakistan are undermined by hardened social biases, discriminatory legislation and unresponsive state institutions, and their lives and livelihood are threatened by violent extremism. Targeted by violent extremists with the agenda of women repression, women's security is especially threatened in the conflict zones in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and the federally administered tribal areas, that is FATA. Women in KPK and FATA experience highly discriminatory laws, and the government's frequent military operations in the region against the militants create further challenges for the women folk, displacing millions of them. In her book, I Am Malala, Nobel Peace Laureate Malala Yousafzai wrote extensively about the living conditions of women in the Swat district of KPK. Education for girls, as she says, was prohibited. Women were denied watching television and pursuing hobbies like singing and dancing. Burqas, head cover, were a must. This young activist, Malala, who stood for girls' education at Swat Valley, survived an attack in 2012 by Mullah Fazlullah's Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan. However, women in KPK, unlike FATA, have constitutional freedom and legal protection. An administrative and legal framework codified in 1901, Colonial Frontier Crimes Regulations (FCR) denies its citizens in FATA constitutionally guaranteed fundamental rights and impartial justice. Disputes are settled according to discriminatory tribal customs. Taliban threatened women with kidnapping and death if they participated in any political activities, particularly in the elections to democratic system as they clash with Sharia. In 2011, Khwendo Kaur, who worked extensively on women's rights in FATA and KPK, published accounts by displaced women from FATA of sexual violence by militants and security officials. Militant violence and heavy military operations have also undermined access to health care and education. Another group, Lashkar-e-Taiba in Pakistan, has been successful in mobilizing mothers to sacrifice their sons to join jihad, a holy war. It insists on purifying Islam by exorcising all extraneous influences of popular culture. The organization has an active women's wing with its own publications, regular meetings, and girls' madrasas. Women at Lashkar-e-Taiba are not given formal military training but are taken to camps to watch young men train. Over the years, many women activists, officials, and teachers have been threatened, attacked, and at times killed by the Taliban. In June 2013, militants blew up a bus carrying female university students at Quetta. On one hand, women in Pakistan are facing tremendous problems from militancy and the state, and on the other hand, they are playing a vital role in peace-building missions. When women across the world are winning Nobel Peace Prizes, it signifies how vital the role of women is in peace-building process against the conflicting world outside. Mosarat Kadim, a Pakistani activist, stated that her work involved rehabilitating young men formerly of Taliban and other radical militias. For this, the mothers of the rebels are taken into confidence. There is a dire need to involve women in the decision-making processes of the government regarding policy making and counterinsurgency programs. Women, education and health issues should be the priority of the state. Efforts should be made towards building an impartial judiciary. Police and media in Pakistan should be gender sensitive and gender responsive. And most importantly, democracy can fight the best war against discrimination and destruction committed by sectarian violence and Talibanization in Pakistan. Thank you.